Okay, now we're going to talk about using financial ratios. So ratio analysis involves methods of calculating and interpreting financial ratios to analyze and monitor the firm's performance. People that might be interested would be current and prospective shareholders, creditors, and management. This is how we monitor a business. So we can do a cross-sectional analysis. This is the comparison of different firms' financial ratios at the same point in time. It involves comparing the firm's ratios to those of other firms in the industry or industry averages. So you might be comparing Lowe's with Home Depot. That would be cross-sectional, and it would be at a specific point in time. Benchmarking is a type of cross-sectional analysis in which the firm's ratio values are compared to those of a key competitor or group of competitors that it wishes to be like. Comparison to industry averages, this is also popular, and we'll see some examples of this coming up. Okay, so here is a comparison to the industry average. So this is called the inventory turnover ratio. What this means is how often are you selling and replenishing your inventory. So here we see the industry average is 9.7 times a year. That means that 9.7 times a year, most businesses in this industry are completely selling and reordering their inventory. And we can see here Swigert Manufacturing has an average of 14.8, so that's not very good, right? So that's what that can tell us. Swigert Manufacturing needs to do something to move that inventory, right? Because if I'm looking at this and I'm thinking of investing in Swigert Manufacturing and I see that they have a 14.8 inventory turnover ratio compared to the industry average of 9.7, I'm probably going to pass. So time series analysis, this is the evaluation of the firm's financial performance over time using financial ratio analysis. It's a comparison of current to past performance using ratios, and it enables the analyst to see the firm's progress. Is it getting better, right, or is it getting worse? Developing trends can be seen by looking at multi-years, and the most informative approach to ratio analysis combines cross-sectional and time series analysis. Ratios that reveal large deviations from the norm merely indicate the possibility of a problem. A single ratio does not generally provide enough information for you to judge the overall performance of that firm. You have to look at everything. So the ratios being compared should be calculated using financial statements dated at the same point in time during the year, and it's preferable to use audited financial statements. The financial data being compared should have been developed in the same way. We want to make sure that each company is using the same type of method, right? Because there are different types of like depreciation method. So if you're trying to look at two companies and one is using one method and another is using a different method, very hard to compare them. And also it's important to remember that results can be distorted by inflation. Liquidity ratios, there are several. One of the most important ones is the current ratio. It measures the ability of the firm to meet its short-term obligations. So it really speaks to cash flow. Are they going to have enough cash to pay their debts? So the current ratio is calculated by taking your current assets and dividing your current liabilities. So for in this example, if we had current assets of $1,223,000 and we had current liabilities of $620,000, we would divide those and get a current ratio of 1.97. Okay. Also, we have the quick or acid test ratio, and this is very similar to the current ratio, except that we're taking our inventory out of the picture, okay? So the quick ratio, when we use those same figures as we did for the current ratio, but we take out our inventory, now we get a quick ratio of 1.51. And the reason it's called the quick ratio is because inventory might not be so easy to sell. And remember, what makes up your current assets? Well, things like cash, and that's very liquid. Accounts receivable is fairly liquid because even if you're not collecting from the original person, big companies will sell accounts receivable to what's known as a factoring company so that they can get their cash very quickly. Okay, so we take out inventory because it's a little more slow moving. Okay, and so what this basically tells us is that for every dollar of asset, we have about 50 cents worth of debt, 1.51. Activity ratios. These tell us the activity or the liquidity of a firm's inventory. This is inventory turnover, and it is the cost of goods sold divided by inventory. All right, so here if we look at the cost of goods sold, 2,088,000 divided by 289,000, this gives us an inventory turnover ratio of 7.2. So what this tells us is that we are turning over our inventory 7.2 times a year. That gives us some information about how active the inventory is, how quickly it's moving. The average age of inventory is the average number of days that sales in inventory. So we take 365 days and we divide it by that inventory turnover. Okay, so for Swigert Company, the average age of inventory is 50.7 days. That means our inventory is sitting on the shelf for 50.7 days and then it's getting sold. Okay, and so we do that 7 times a year, 7.2 times a year. The average collection period, this is the amount of time needed to collect accounts receivable. This is very important. How quickly are we getting the cash in? When we sell something on credit, how quickly are we getting the cash in? So we take accounts receivable and we divide it by the average sales per day. And so how do you get average sales per day? You take your annual sales and divide them by 365. So if we work that out for Swigert Company, my fictitious company, it would be 503,000. That's our accounts receivable balance. And our annual sales were 3,074,000. We divide that by 365. That gives us average sales per day of 8,422. And we divide that out. We see that it is taking us 59.7 days to collect an accounts receivable. Now, this to me is a little bit of a red flag because accounts receivable are supposed to be paid typically in 30 days or less. Okay, and this one's taking almost 60 days. So as a financial analyst, when I look at this, I would want to say, well, what can we do to improve this ratio? How can we collect money faster? Maybe we need to tighten up our credit a little bit and not give credit to everyone. Okay, the next is the average payment period. This is the average amount of time needed to pay accounts payable. It's much like the average collection period. Okay, so we take our accounts payable, divide it by the average purchases per day. How do we get average purchases per day? We take our annual purchases and we divide by 365. Okay, so here if we assume that Swigert Company's purchases equaled 70% of its cost of goods sold in 2015, then the average payment would be our accounts payable divided by 70% multiplied by the 2,088,000, this is our annual purchases, divided by 365, which gives us 4,004. And so that works out to be 95.4 days. So our average payment period, we're taking almost 100 days to pay our suppliers. Now, that just kind of depends on what kind of terms we have with our suppliers. Often suppliers will offer a discount if you pay it off within, say, 30 days. So this might be something you want to look at and say, you know, hey, we could save some money if we paid them off a little quicker, okay? So that's just some of the things that this type of information can tell us. Next, total asset turnover. This indicates the efficiency with which the firm uses its assets to generate sales. And so we take sales and divide it by the total assets. Okay, and so total assets, that's going to be listed on the balance sheet. If you recall in my previous recording, we looked at the balance sheet, they totaled current assets and then fixed assets, and then we added our current and our fixed to get total assets. So the ratios are not difficult, it's just a matter of knowing where do I look to get these numbers? Where do I get these numbers off of the financial statements? So I will show you right here, total assets, they're listing, you may recall this from the previous video, 3,597,000 is your total assets. And if I go back to my balance sheet, if I can find it real quick, there it is. There's my total assets, 3,597,000. Okay, all of this is in millions. That's not 3,597. It's 3,597,000. So there are a lot of other ratios. I don't have time to go over them all. But the biggest thing to remember is just knowing where do I find the information. If a ratio says to take your current assets and divide it by your current liabilities, okay, so you go to your balance sheet, you find your current assets under the assets section, then you go to your liabilities and you find your current liabilities. So it's basically knowing where to look, okay? And then the other thing about ratios is just understanding what they actually mean so that you can interpret them and, you know, discover what they're actually telling you about the company. Good luck, everybody. I will see you in the discussion.